Welcome back to our community. Susie Thomas visiting with Ruth Graham. What a special treat today. Author of Forgiving My Father, Forgiving Myself. So let's talk about the book. Forgiving My Father, Forgiving Myself. What made you sit down and write this, Ruth?
Well, I wanted to have someone walk with me through the process myself. And so I looked at everything around and all the books I'd read, and I didn't find it. So I decided to write it. And I wanted to write a book. I'm not an expert. I'm just an apprentice. I'm just trying to learn how to do this. And so I let people walk with me through the good, the bad, and the ugly and see what my process was, what God did in and through me, and how he continues to do that. So that was why I wrote the book, was to help others to learn about forgiveness, because forgiveness is so much more than we think it is. It's we tend to think of it as a gift we give ourselves, or something we let go of, or a way to get healthy emotionally, and all of that may be true, but it really is a sacred experience. It's an invitation to a miracle. And I want to raise it to the sacramental level, because, what was Jesus doing when he said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do? He was dying.
Yeah.
We have to die to ourselves, and we have to understand how much God has done for us, so that we, in turn, want to give him back the forgiveness that we owe, the forgiveness that we want to grant, or maybe even the forgiveness we don't want to grant. We want to work towards that. We want to work in the process.
How difficult was it to become as vulnerable as you become when you're sharing your story?
Yes, it was difficult to become vulnerable, and it's scary. It's very scary. But once you do it and you realize that there are others out there that feel the same way you do, or who have experienced the same thing, or are struggling the same way, then it's wonderful. It's ministry. It's you find a heart. I find heart companions all along the way. There's no condemnation, and the people who condemn me, they're I'm not going to pay attention to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been condemned. There's no question I've been condemned, and I don't. But that God doesn't condemn me.
Yeah, what's that
And
whole?
He's the one I care about.
Yes, those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind.
That's right. Exactly right.
What's been the response? I'm sure you've had people, editors, and so forth be reading this. I'm sure it's been life-changing for them as well. What's been the response as people have been going the process?
Well, they have said that it's made a difference in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very grateful for that. When you deliver a book, it's like delivering a baby, and you just wait for people to count all the fingers and toes and eyelashes and ears and eyes, and then you wait for somebody to criticize it until you're just waiting with bated breath. But I got such positive response from so many people that was very rewarding. And all I want really is the Lord's positive response. And I think that he will use this to minister to so many people, especially a lot of people as we started out our conversation, in ministry.
Yes.
People who have sacrificed so much for their families or for their ministry. And I hope it will minister to them in very solid ways and maybe begin to change some things, because I think evangelicals need to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about the miracle. I love that you are looking at forgiveness and saying a miracle happens. It's not just you feel better, you release, all those things happen, but an actual miracle takes place.
Oh, my, yes.
Describe that more.
It's my youngest daughter had 2 babies out of wedlock, and we just did not get along at all. At one point, she walked out of the house, and I didn't know whether she'd come back or not, and I just... it was a very hard time. And there was a time I didn't like her. I loved her, but I didn't like her. But we maintained sort of an uneasy relationship. And after she had her baby with special needs, and she had come to be with me at a hospital where I needed attention, and really she walked with me through that process. Healing began, and then she was invited to speak at a pro-life event in Canada.
Wow.
And we thought, well, maybe this is the time for her to get her feet wet, to begin to talk about this. And we did that together, and I cannot tell you, Susie, when I was listening to her speak, tears streamed down my face they were cleansing tears. You know, our relationship was restored, and it has been restored. She and her husband have moved down from Philadelphia to be with me nearby, and it's wonderful to have them close. But I never would have dreamed that I would ever say that, because there was a day I couldn't have told you I liked my kids. Wow. But I've lived long enough to tell you I like my kids. They're great kids.
Oh, my gosh. What a great story. And how
that's
encouraging.
Forgiveness at work.
Yes. And how encouraging to everybody. Because everyone, any parent who has any kind of a job, it takes you away from the family for some time. And anybody who's been a parent can look back and go, well, I could have done that a lot better. And we do all need to come together and read your words that I believe God's given you to release this kind of miracle-working power and the restoration of relationships. It's got to be just so great for you.
It is. I'm looking forward to it. It's an invitation to display the character of God. And isn't that what we want? We want to be more like Him.
Mm-hmm. No one could really empathize what your experience has been, probably more than your own siblings. Have they read this yet? Have you talked about
Not
this
yet.
Together?
They haven't read it yet, and I don't. They haven't gotten their copies yet.
Mm-hmm. In conversations, have you talked about? It's a different dynamic once the parents have gone to heaven, and the siblings are all suddenly we're all at the top of the totem pole. What a different dynamic, isn't it? That do you all share an experience? Have they? You said you were the middle child. That's a unique one all in itself.
Yes.
Have you discussed? Have they experienced something similar to what you described?
Some of my siblings have and are willing to talk about it. Some of them aren't, and that's okay. That's their story. You know, I've got my own story, and I have to leave it there.
Yeah, that's good. Who is this for? Who should read this book?
Anybody who's ever struggled with forgiveness. And I think that's probably just about everybody.
I'm thinking then who doesn't? Who shouldn't?
That's right. That's right.
Yes. And as you're talking about children too, there is a point where the relationship changes when a parent and a child are both adults. And there is a different dynamic. And as you described, the forgiveness taking place between your daughter and yourself, what would you say to that one who is listening right now saying, I know what you're talking about. I'm at a point right now where we've really hit a wall. What would you say to that person as far as taking that step towards restoration of that relationship through forgiveness?
Don't close the door. Always leave it open. Love them unconditionally. Let them know that. And you don't have to like them, but you do love them. And let the Lord work on them. Just pray, 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 and let the Lord work on them. Work on their hearts and minds. And He promises if they're children of the covenant, then, you know, He's going to take care of them.
Mm-hmm. If there's one thing that you want everybody who reads this, and I hope everyone within the sound of our voices reads this book, if there's one takeaway, what would you have that be?
It would be that forgiveness is an invitation to freedom. It's not fair, it's not fun, it's not easy. There are a lot of things it's not, but it's an invitation to freedom. And don't we all want freedom?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes, though, it's that thing that's really hard to talk about. You can get together, and there's that elephant in the room, and you skirt around it. How do you address it? How do you bring that up in a conversation?
Well, if you're me, you just blurt it out.
Well, I love that.
I just say it right out. Make other people squirm. But I just believe in being honest and vulnerable to the point, not to the point of being rude or ugly or just spilling your guts inappropriately, but just to really be honest about where you are and what's going on in your life. And I think God uses that. I really do. I just don't think we can underestimate vulnerability.
Where do we get it? Forgiving My Father, Forgiving Myself by Ruth Graham. Where can we get this?
Any bookseller, Amazon. You can go to my website, ruthgraham.com. anywhere books are sold.
Ruth Graham, I wish we could go for another hour or so, but our time is up, and I cannot thank you enough for your time today and for sharing something so important for our health, even for our mental and spiritual health. Forgiving My Father, Forgiving Myself by Ruth Graham. Thank you so much for bringing this to our community today.
Thank you, Susie.